I sound like a nerd when I say it, but democracy is hard. And I think we have an obligation to these candidates and to these legislators for whatever office that they're running for to really kind of help them be better at their job.
Big issues, real conversations, real Coloradans, no BS.
The incomparable, legendary, you only know if you know, Mike Beasley with us again. And I'm going to attempt this word that we've been hearing a lot over this last few days, turducken. Did I get it right? Turducken, which means they're going to take a bunch of stuff and shove it in to a bill. So first let's talk about the PUC reauthorization, but then we're going to talk about what's really important right now, and that's the budget. So PUC energy reauthorization. Everybody on our energy committee asks me the same thing. What does Beasley say? So we're going to call this segment What Beasley Said.
Well, yeah, that's not good. So what I would say is it possible that the PUC sunset bill could become a magnet for all kinds of different ideas under a broad title that involves somehow the Public Utilities Commission? It is definitely possible. Have those conversations been occurring? No.
Okay.
Not the ones that I've been involved in or the ones I've heard about. What I hear more about isn't what folks want to put into the PUC sunset bill. It's what folks want to take out of the existing draft. So does that mean that there aren't elements, around here on the left and the right that want to continue to add different ideas that they couldn't get through in their own separate bill? It is always possible. I don't think we're going to know about that for probably another 2 or 3 weeks. I don't see that bill being in committee until around the 16th or the 23rd range, because the state budget is, a good 10 days or so late. So I think we'll know a lot more then. And then I also think that people have to be mindful of what they put in that bill, because it'll drive a fiscal note. And the state really doesn't have extra money laying around. And because of where we stand with our Tabor limits, it's a challenge to raise fees because of the effects it will have on Tabor going out the door. So I'm sure there may be goals out there, but right now it's murky on what can be done.
So what happens if the PUC reauthorization does not get passed this session?
So we've seen in the past where a regulatory body bill doesn't pass, like the Division of Insurance years ago, for example, and then it would get a year to wind down or a year for the legislature to come back and pass another bill. And so that certainly could happen. It's been talked about, especially in the last 100 days, that maybe, this should be something the next governor should deal with and allow his new Department of Regulatory Agencies, his new PUC members or her members take a look at. And so it's too early to say.
Love that answer. And we'd love the idea of letting this just sort of marinate until the new governor's in, and we could do that. What's the thing that scares you most about the budget right now?
I wouldn't say that I'm scared about the budget or I have fear. My fear would be that we actually haven't cut and enough, and that we're still in this hole, and yet we continue to want to spend more on like a school finance act that can't be sustained, on healthcare that we can't afford because either new people are enrolling or healthcare is becoming more expensive. The governor, understandably so, advocated for funding to create more bed space in our Department of Corrections. I believe that number was around 26 million of new funding that he'll get for that. And so we continue to see this debate over priorities in the state budget, and the JBC, the 6 members in a bipartisan way, really struggled to come up with the budget that you see today. And it'll be curious to see, especially how the Democrats in these large majorities react to the decisions made there. We'll know more about that next week. They just finished the budget a couple hours ago.
So the budget just passed. What happens with that now?
Well, they're going to spend the next 5 or so days printing it up because it's going to be about that thick. And then they will start caucusing and talking about it in the House next week. Then they'll send it over to the Senate for the week after that. And then they'll spend a few days the week after that figuring out any differences between the two houses. And then once that's done and on its way to the governor, probably by the 23rd or so of April, that'll be on the 10-day clock. So that means the governor will have 10 days to deal with it. And then from there, once we know what the budget is, then the hundreds of bills that are still around in this process will start to move either out of appropriations or from one chamber to the other. And it'll mean that in the last 3.5 or so weeks of session, we'll move probably close to 400 bills.
400 bills in the last 3 weeks of session. That's never, is that standard or is that a lot? It feels like a whole lot.
We're probably around 50 bills lighter this session than last session. Normally when a budget goes through the process, for example, they have what they call the orbitable bills. And those usually around 30 or 40, we're going to be closer to 80 to 90 like we were last year. So when the budget comes out, there's going to be all the bills that implement the cuts. You know, the budget is just the numbers, but then you have to change the statutes. We're going to have probably close to 90 bills to do that. It's a lot of work.
Holy, that's a lot of work. We heard from one of the members today that there's emotions are running really high around this budget. Is that true?
I think this has been one of the strangest sessions I've had in over 30 years. A lot of tension inside both political parties and with each other, political party with political party. And it's a difficult environment. I would suggest, though, as an old person that I am, that a lot of these folks really haven't been in environment legislators where they really have had to cut. The cuts are coming. I think the next governor is going to have a very, very difficult decisions, plural, to make when they become governor. And when they come up in January of 27, they're going to probably want to make, send something over like previous governors have done to reprioritize or ask the Joint Budget Committee to do things differently. That really matters if you're in healthcare, if you're in rural Colorado, if you are somehow interacting with the state agency, whether it's local affairs, natural resources, Department of Health. People are really going to care about what the next governor is going to do.
That's all the discussion seems to be. It's for us, it's what does Beasley think and who do you think the next governors are going to be? That's the question. The two questions I get the most. The third one, of course, is what's happening in Pueblo. But the budget, I think we're mostly concerned about the healthcare part of it, especially for our rural hospitals. Is there any light at the end of the tunnel? Is there?
I think the uncertainty for our rural hospitals remains in place. There were folks like Senator Omble and Representative Sirota, Senator Kirkmeyer, really Representative Brown, really in a bipartisan fashion. They really did everything they really struggled to try and protect hospitals and rural hospitals. There is going to be a provider rate cut. I don't know the number off the top of my head that they arrived at, but if you're a rural hospital, you have the uncertainty not just of the state budget, but I would suggest that the federal government isn't that great of a partner either currently, and so their risk is as high as it's ever been, and I think there's plenty to worry about.
Well, and for private insurance, like for us, the increase in rates they preemptively happened before any decisions were made or anything like that. So they're already anticipating dramatic costs. So for us, it's huge, and I don't know how people are going to be able to do this. I think the other thing is we looked at all the tax bills and what we're calling the cost shifting bills, where it's new fees and they're trying to figure out how to pay for everything. what is this going to affect the average household in Colorado? What do
I
we?
think it's too hard to say because you see the 10 bills that are here, but you also see bills that are or initiatives that are being circulated by the public. One that would do a graduated income tax, and
Yes.
so if you, I think the number was over $300,000, and you pay a higher percentage in taxes, income tax. You have another initiative that's going to be circulating that would cap corporate and personal income at 4.4%, I believe. So that's coming from, let's call it center right of the debate. The legislature is going to refer Senate Bill 135, which is a massive, I'm sure I will offend people, but it's a debrucing.
Yes.
That would allow them to keep, the last figure I saw was about 5.9 billion of new revenue that comes in, that they'll just be able to keep that until they get to that new level. That in effect is debrucing without actually debrucing. If you go back to the Ref C that we worked on 20 some years ago, that collected about 1.8 billion over time. This takes that cap and makes it even much larger. They tell you that they're going to put $200 million a year for 10 years into education. So, but when you look at that overall pot of money, that's about 15 or so percent of those dollars go to education for over 10 years, but that the rest of it is
Yeah.
is my word debruced in perpetuity or until you get to that cap. I think a lot of people are going to struggle with that. I really do, and I think telling folks that it's about education, but only giving them that small slice.
Yeah.
I think of my dad sitting at the kitchen table reading his blue book, not going for that. So. But the proponents are passionate. I think their heart's in the right place. I just don't know if the voters are going to accept that.
The voters of Colorado are wildly protective of Tabor. And I think it's largely because they don't trust this body to make good decisions. And I think I agree with you. It's going to be hard to say, look at what you guys have done, and now you're asking us for more. You guys couldn't get this done correctly. So why would we give you more money?
I think that statewide debrucing is a complicated topic. And what I would say is, as someone who worked on Ref C years ago, it took a couple of years to build into it. Certainly that has been spent on Senate Bill 135. But it had bipartisan support. It had a bipartisan coalition. And there isn't as much of a bipartisan coalition on the Senate Bill 135 referral. And so I think the voters are going to struggle with it myself. I know, I'm sure the proponents would be unhappy that I'm saying that, but it's my way I see it. I think the voters are going to see a large amount of revenue going into the budget that could be spent on whatever, and telling you you're going to spend it on education when they only get a fraction of the money.
Yeah, that's not very much. Let me ask you really quick, what happens if this body cannot come to a decision about the budget? What happens?
So the legislature is only required to do one bill a year, and that's the state budget. So there will always be an agreement on the budget. If not, we'll always end up in special session. We've had a couple of special sessions the last 2 summers around revenue and taxes, property tax in particular. I actually think this budget is in a condition where the voters are going to have to decide. And do they want to raise taxes and revenues to support this kind of spending, or do they say no to that, and we have to reprioritize what we already have within the budget? Again, that'll fall into the lap of the next legislature and the next governor. So I really think they've done everything they can at this point, and I really think it's going to be up to the voters.
All right. What do you want our members, Action Colorado members and communities to know?
I would tell our members that it's important to stay engaged, to tell the legislature what's important to them, to pay attention, to reach out to candidates in both political parties and really educate them on what's important. I sound like a nerd when I say it, but democracy is hard. And I think we have an obligation to these candidates and to these legislators for whatever office that they're running for, to really kind of help them be better at their job. And so That's what Action Colorado does, and it's been very valuable, and I hope we keep it up.
Awesome. Thanks, Beasley.
Okay.
We appreciate
Thank you.
And that's what Beasley said.
The views and opinions expressed on the show do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of the Action Colorado board members or staff. Action Colorado does not endorse candidates for office, but we do support our members. If you are a candidate running for office, or if you are a member of Action Colorado, you have an open invitation to come onto the show. If you have any questions or would like to discuss a topic on the show, or just for our information about joining Action Colorado, please email us at sarah@actioncolorado.org.